Thank you for listening to the show on Really Big Something Channel. October 30th, 2017.
105 here on the great WRKO. Okay, my friends, I will be off tomorrow and Wednesday. I'll be back hopefully on Thursday. Very special announcement this Friday, 2:35. It's with a very heavy heart, but I have to go to attend a wake and a funeral for a very, very dear friend. The only reason why I have not mentioned that person's name is out of respect for the wishes of the grieving widow and their two little children. They wanted the wake and the funeral to be completely private. I know some information is leaked publicly. That's on their conscience. It's not on mine. But anyway, very difficult time for me, for everybody. Brittany will be coming as well to the wake and to the funeral. And Mike Siegel will be filling in for me tomorrow and Wednesday. Hopefully I'll be back on Thursday with a very special announcement this Friday at 2:35. Okay, Paul Manafort indicted on 12 counts. Robert Mueller now goes for Manafort's throat. He also indicted not just Manafort, his protege Rick Gates, and an advisor, a foreign policy advisor to the Trump campaign, has also pleaded guilty to obstruction of justice. I've looked at the 12-page indictment. Sorry, at the 31-page indictment, at the 12 counts. It is essentially conspiracy against the United States. It is tax fraud. It is wire fraud. It is money laundering. The one word or the one name that never appears in all 31 pages, President Donald Trump. Most of these accusations and charges against Manafort date years before he was the Trump campaign chairman. And so it is obvious to me that Mueller is simply trying to use these charges, they may be true, they may not be true, to try to intimidate Manafort, leverage him, and flip him against the president. He also wants to make it seem that his investigation is starting to produce results to justify its credibility, to continue fomenting the flames of anti-Trump hysteria, and to justify the massive resources and money that he's spending. My prediction, it's going to blow up in Mueller's face. He can try to flip Manafort all he wants. The problem is all roads from Russia lead to Hillary. Not to Trump, but to Hillary. Manafort can destroy the Podesta group. He can destroy Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton. On Trump, there is nothing. The irony is, he's going to try to get information on Manafort to turn on Trump. He won't be able to because there's nothing to get. And if Manafort really does cooperate, and if Mueller is really serious about conducting his investigation, I'll tell you who he should be indicting. John Podesta, Tony Podesta, Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, Eric Holder, Loretta Lynch. They should all come crashing down. And so this brings me now to the $64,000 question. Knowing now what we now know in retrospect, remember the infamous meeting at Trump Tower in June of 2016, whereby Don Jr. was in a room with Jared Kushner and Paul Manafort. And he allegedly met with a Russian lawyer. And the Russian lawyer allegedly said that she had damaging information on Hillary Clinton. And Don Jr. said, hey, you've got Oppo research you can give us on Clinton. We're going to happy to take a look at it. Was that meeting now, in retrospect, a setup by Paul Manafort to ensnare the Trump campaign and try to legitimize these charges of colluding with Russia? Because we now know that Manafort was beholden to the Podesta group to the tune of tens of millions of dollars. All of the lobbying the Russians did with Manafort went through the Podesta group. It appears that Manafort made over $75 million shilling for these Russian oligarchs. And so knowing now that he was in bed with the Podestas, knowing now that he was the key middle guy that enabled the Russians to funnel $145 million into the Clinton Foundation to help the Podestas lobby Hillary Clinton on the Uranium One deal. If you're looking to bring down Trump, the way to do it is set him up with a Russian. Set him up with a Russian lawyer who claims that she's got sources or contacts in the Kremlin, and have her meet top people of the campaign. And of course, Don Jr., completely not experienced, the most inexperienced political guy in the world. Jared Kushner, second, just a little bit more experienced. Both of them highly inexperienced. And there they go for the meeting. If nobody else has the guts to say it, I'm going to say it. I believe Manafort was acting as a mole for the Podestas and for the Clintons. Just my opinion. 6-1, to sabotage and subvert the Trump campaign from within. And notice, the moment they got rid of Manafort, because Trump is a results guy, and he saw the numbers were going down, 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 the moment they threw Manafort overboard, Kellyanne Conway came on board, Steve Bannon came on board, and what did they tell Trump? Donald, just be Donald. Talk about immigration, talk about the wall, talk about trade, talk about foreign policy, talk about the travel ban, stick to your core issues, stick to America first. Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Ohio, they will fall in your hand like a ripe fruit, which is exactly what happened. And so to me, the bigger question I want to know now, was Manafort a double agent acting on behalf of the Podestas and the Clintons? 617-266-6868 is the number. Okay, the Kuhner Country poll question of the day, powered by Bill Kelly Financial Services. Do you believe that the indictments against Manafort will eventually bring down Trump? Can Mueller leverage this to eventually bring down the big prize, which is the president himself? If you believe the answer is yes, text the letter A to 680-680. If you believe the answer is no, there may be some smoke, but there's no fire, Jeff. Text the letter B to 680-680. You can vote online at WRKO.com. Brittany, what are the poll results thus far?
94% no, 6% yes.
I'm just curious. I know you're like me. You're in a state of grief right now, but right. Are you an A or a B?
I'm a no. I'm a B. No, I don't think so. He's in a... I think Trump is going to come out perfectly fine on this one. All the information that we have right now points in the direction of Hillary Clinton and her campaign. So I think the chips will fall and Hillary Clinton will be the one in trouble and not Donald Trump.
Freddie in Beverly. Go ahead, Freddie. Hello,
Hi, Jeff.
Freddie?
Jeff?
Hey, Freddie, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Hi, thanks for taking my call.
My pleasure.
Sorry about your friend.
Thank you.
What I wanted to say was, this is definitely just a total scam, this whole thing. When the Clinton campaign did an internal survey to see what Hillary Clinton's biggest vulnerability was, they found out it was the uranium deal, that 53% of voters weren't likely to vote for her because of that. And so what they did was, there was a WikiLeaks email that I think came out in 12/21/15, where they said the best approach to slaughter Donald Trump with is to go after him for his bromance with Putin. And they decided that Machiavellian approach was to give Donald Trump the same problem that Hillary Clinton had, give him that same vulnerability, and to use that against him. And we know that this whole scam was made, as you said, because of that fake dossier that they paid for, and that we also know that they didn't even let, when they said that the Russians had attacked their computer, they didn't even let the intelligence agency actually examine their computers to see if it was the Russians. And the intelligence agencies actually allowed them to take their word for it that it was the Russians without actually examining it. And the whole thing is just a scam that was thought up to help attack Donald Trump, again, based on Hillary Clinton's vulnerability transferred to Donald Trump.
Absolutely brilliant. Brilliant. Freddie, thank you so much. And please don't be a stranger. Call again, Freddie. Look, you touched on something key. They're alleging all of this collusion. Okay, fine. You're alleging this collusion. How come the FBI refused to look at the hard drives of the DNC when their emails were being hacked, or Podesta's computer? How come they wouldn't look at the hard drives of either Podesta's of Podesta's computers, or of the computers at the DNC? If you really want to find out who was behind it, how come you don't want to look into the source of the leaks and track it back to the so-called Russians? You know why? Because they were trying to cover up for Hillary. Because everybody knows that it wasn't the Russians who hacked the DNC, and it wasn't the Russians who hacked Podesta's email. It was Seth Rich and disgruntled Bernie supporters who rightly saw these people are gangsters, like in Mother Russia, and they stole the thing from Bernie. Like, to me, what is stunning to this day, look, I don't care for Bernie. I'm not a progressive. I'm not a socialist. But he won. Bernie legitimately won that primary. He won. And so you look at all these WikiLeaks emails, the ones, they were stolen, they were hacked. Yeah, why don't you read them? CNN had the questions ahead of time. They were spying on Bernie's campaign. Hillary had moles within Bernie's campaign. They were leaking stuff about Bernie. They knew what Bernie was doing before even Bernie knew what he was doing. So they completely rigged the primary because, let's be honest, come on, among us, in the base of the Democratic Party, yes, Hillary's very strong on top with the donors, with Wall Street, with the big banks, all of that. But with the base of the party, it's Bernie's party. It's a left-wing progressive, whatever you think about him, it's a party of left-wing progressives. I mean, it is. And so you can see it even at the rallies. He had all the energy, all the passion, all the momentum. The 2016 election should have been Donald Trump versus Bernie Sanders. And so Seth Rich and others saw this and said, oh my God, like, what is this, a dictatorship? That's why they hacked the emails. That's why Julian Assange has said repeatedly, I'm telling you, it wasn't the Russians. It wasn't. He's even willing to, look, he goes, if you'll give me a pardon, I'll show you exactly who the hell hacked it. So, no, to me, it's very obvious. And as for Seth Rich, I don't care what anybody says, I believe he was murdered. I've looked at Seth Rich, that murder investigation, that to me is another sham. How he was shot, how he was killed, what happened, how he wanted to meet with the FBI, give them incredibly damaging, incriminating evidence. I look at that and I see exactly what I saw in Arkansas when I covered the Clintons. You want to blow the whistle on them and just conveniently you end up dead. It's just incredible. 617-266-6868. Russ in Boston. Go ahead, Russ.
First of all, Jeff, my condolences to the loss of a friend.
Thank you.
Who did his best doing the Lord's work here on earth, and he gave his children the greatest gift of all, the gift of faith.
Thank you.
And there was no question that he was a man of God.
Thank you.
Now, getting to the item of the day, seriously, there was no evidence at all implementing Trump to any of this garbage. And, those that want to see his downfall, they can wish it all they want, but it's not going to happen. And what I hope will happen is the anti-Trumpers have opened up Pandora's box that will come and bite them in the rear end at the end of the day.
I think you're right. Russ, honestly, I think they were too cute by half on this one. And I think now, especially now when you have some serious investigations taking place in Congress, and I'll tell you what the big news over this weekend was, that Trump publicly called for a special counsel, a special investigation into Hillary and Uranium One. Now that the president is all on board, he is going to put so much pressure on Jeff Sessions, so much pressure on the DOJ and the Attorney General, they're going to have to appoint a second special counsel. This time on Hillary. And I'm telling you, if there is a proper investigation of Hillary, all you've got to do is open up the Clinton Foundation books. But look, I'm up against it on time. I just want to ask all of you something. If you're Vladimir Putin, I want you to put yourself now in his shoes. Okay? You're presiding over a resurgent Russia. You're in the Kremlin. What is more important for you? Crimea or Syria? Because remember, the one thing that Trump agreed with Putin on, in fact, look, I can't stand Putin. I can't stand ex-KGB. I can't stand these guys. What they did to my family is disgusting. Okay, I'll never forgive them for it. But even I, an anti-communist to the core, said, well, no, I mean, radical Islam is in Syria. ISIS is in Syria. They're Russia's enemy. They're our enemy. Why don't we ally on this issue, and take them out? So less Americans die, less Russians die. We can do it quicker. Anyway, Raqqa has now fallen. Okay? Syria essentially has won the war against ISIS. Putin never really needed us for that. He didn't. I mean, we helped. Of course we helped. There's no question about it. The Kurds, our U.S.-backed militias, they helped. But in the end, Russia and Bashar Assad could have taken care of ISIS. So what is for Putin the bigger prize? The bigger prize is Crimea. And if you know anything, as I do, of the Russian nationalist psyche, Crimea is something they've been hungering for hundreds of years. And what Putin wanted was to know that he could go into Crimea, annex it, gobble it up, and not start a war with the West. He doesn't care about sanctions. He can weather the sanctions. The one thing, as a Russian nationalist, I want Crimea, but not at the cost of a war with the United States and NATO. That's what Hillary and Obama gave him. So this whole idea that somehow, Trump said let's ally with Russia on ISIS, who cares? That's self-evident. The big prize for Putin was always Crimea and eastern Ukraine. And under Obama and Hillary, he got it. So I'm asking you, who colluded with whom? Who served whose interests? More with your calls next. 127 here on the great WRKO. Okay, I never thought I would see the day, but it has now arrived. So, as you know, before I came to Boston, I used to live in Washington, D.C., or to be specific, rarely do people live in D.C. They either live in Northern Virginia or suburban Maryland, but they work in D.C. Why do I mention this? There is a church in Alexandria, Virginia, Northern Virginia. I've been to it actually several times. It is incredible. It is Christ Church in Alexandria, Virginia. And you may be saying, Jeff, okay, you went to a church, an Episcopalian church, Christ Church in Alexandria, Virginia. What does this have to do with life? It is George Washington's church. It is the church that George Washington attended for over 2 decades when he was the father of our country during the Revolutionary War. In fact, just a little bit before the Revolutionary War, all the way through until his presidency. And when you go there, you are steeped in history. It is the church that not only Washington attended, it is named after him. There is a beautiful plaque right near the altar commemorating Washington. There is also a wonderful plaque commemorating the very pew that Washington and his family would sit in, kneel, and pray during church services. Well, guess what? Because some moonbats complained, I'm not kidding, some snowflake progressives complained that they are honoring a quote-unquote racist slaveholder, the people now who oversee the church have now decided to remove that plaque honoring our founding father. And they say that, quote, according now to the people who run Christ Church, the plaques in our sanctuary make some in our presence feel unsafe or unwelcome. And so because this may hurt somebody's feelings, they have now decided to remove the plaques. And according to them, some visitors and guests who worship with us choose not to return because they receive an unintended message from the prominent presence of these plaques. In other words, these plaques remind them of slavery. And so they say, many in our congregation feel a strong need for the church to stand clearly on the side of all are welcome, no exceptions. So I want you to think about this. The man who was pivotal in winning our war for independence, the father of our country, the man who is admired by the entire world, Irish nationalists, Gandhi, the founders of Israel, I could go down country after country, who admire him for his Republican virtue, his honesty, his patriotism, frankly, his greatness, is now having his own plaques taken down in his very own church, in his very own country. Something is seriously wrong here. 617-266-6868. Let's take it to Evan Heidenrich with the latest in the newsroom. 137 here on the great WRKO. Again, my apologies to all of you if I just seem a little sad and depressed. I lost a very dear friend. I was going to talk about the George Washington plaque. I'm not. I have to go to a wake today. And tomorrow I have to go to a funeral. And we're grieving here on the Kuhner Report. My wife is grieving. My children are grieving. Brittany's grieving. We've lost a very dear friend. I'd love to say the person's name, but I can't. I want to respect the family's wishes. The widow has asked me specifically not to say anything about the person's name. The children have said the same thing. They are very upset that the information was made public. They feel it was a profound violation of this person's privacy and his dignity because he wanted to have a private funeral and a private wake. It was the kind of man he was. He was a very dear friend. He meant a lot to this show. But more than that, he was one of my best friends. And he was an old school guy. He always had my back. And I've spent the weekend with his son. Son is despondent, doesn't know what to do. And had them play with my kids a little bit, just to try to make him forget a little bit for a couple of hours. So constantly thinking about it. And so they wanted to go to Chili's for some cheeseburgers. I took them to Chili's for some cheeseburgers. Ashton, Ava, him, Grace was there as well. And he just started crying. Every time he dreams, he thinks of his father. His father's never going to come back. And it just makes you realize what's important in life. And I just wanted him to know that his father was a great man, that his father was very special, that his father was one of the few people I've ever met in my life who always had my back, who put principle, patriotism, God, country, family first. He was a true friend, and you meet very rare friends, very rare. You're very blessed if you can meet one true friend in your life. He was one of my true friends, and his passing came quick. It was extremely unexpected. It's been a tremendous shock to me, to Brittany, especially to his wife and his two wonderful children. Anyway, you think about what's important in life. Trust me when I tell you this. It's your family. Enjoy your time with your family as much as you can, because it goes by so fast. And treasure your friendships, because sometimes they go, and there are many things you want to say, but you don't say because you think you have a lot more time together, but you don't. So anyway, I want to apologize again. I've been very emotional on today's show. I want to do today's show. I will be off tomorrow. I'll be off on Wednesday. Mike Siegel will be filling in. I'll be back on Thursday, and I'll have a special announcement for everybody. 2:35 this Friday. But anyway. 617-266-6868. Yeah, pretty. Can we go to break, please? 146 here on the great WRKO. Again, please, my apologies to everybody. Okay, so, I can't believe this. I absolutely cannot believe this. So, I went to this church. It's a beautiful church. It is the church that George Washington attended for 2 decades, the end of his life, while he was the founder of our country. It is steeped in history. There are plaques honoring him. There's even a plaque at the very pew where he and his family would go and pray every week at this church. And now, because apparently some liberals, a couple of snowflakes, complained, according now to the people who now oversee that church, they want to send a strong message that all are welcome, no exceptions. And I've just got to say this. As somebody who studied Washington's life, we are so blessed that he was our founding father. In fact, the point that I made to our program director, Michael, is when we did our pre-show meeting, I said, in fact, after he won our Revolutionary War and he was determined to set up a constitutional republic, King George III, Washington's arch nemesis, vowed and predicted, he said, Washington will make himself a military dictator within 2 years, I guarantee it. And he could not believe that Washington did not do that. That, in fact, Washington, instead of amassing more powers, did literally the very opposite. He wanted to strip the presidency of as few powers as possible, give as much to the people, as much to the states, and whatever is in the federal government, give it to Congress, which is the closest branch, the branch closest to the people. And he voluntarily served only 2 terms. He could have served until his death. He was that revered and popular, but like the great Roman general Cincinnatus, he said, I'm going to serve 2 terms, serve my people, and then I will go and tend to my garden. And of all of his great qualities, his incredible generalship, his military leadership, his ability to navigate between Thomas Jefferson, Alexander Hamilton, helping to oversee the Constitutional Convention, helping to shepherd the Constitution, creating our nation in our republic. The one thing that stood out about him was his virtue. In fact, everybody said that about him. He was not corrupt. In fact, it's the very opposite of what you see in Washington today, in Washington, D.C. He was completely without corruption. He could not be bought or paid for. And you go to Ireland, say take Eamon de Valera or Michael Collins, when they set up the Irish Republic, their heroes, George Washington. The founders of the State of Israel, their hero, George Washington. Gandhi in India, his hero, George Washington. In other words, here is a man who, by the sheer example of his life, is revered and admired all over the world. And we're trashing him here in the United States? We're taking down the very plaques of him in the very church that he attended? Because some snowflake millennials are angry or upset because Washington happened to be a slaveholder? Well, Everybody or most people around the world held slaves at that time. Slavery was part of the world. In fact, it had been for 10,000 years. So I want you to think about how utterly dishonest and disingenuous it is, how ahistorical it is. And the example I use is this. When I was talking to Jared about this in our office before we got on the air today, he was having a plate of pasta. I forget what it was, but it had some meat in it. I said, Jared, are you a meat eater? Are you eating meat? He said, yes. I said, Jared, imagine 500 years from now, for whatever reason, society evolves, and they believe that eating meat, not just whatever, unhealthy for you, that it literally is killing animals. And that animals have spirits, and that murdering animals is immoral and wrong. And so eating meat is banned. It's considered a form of murder. It's considered immoral. I said, imagine if 500 years later, all of your achievements in life were judged by the fact that you ate meat. I said, what would you say from the grave? You would say, but everybody ate meat. Everybody around the world pretty much ate meat. There was nothing abnormal about it. In fact, for most of human history, people have eaten meat. I know there are vegetarians and vegans, but, for the most part. So why are you judging me by the standards of your time and imposing them upon the past? It's what we call in the historical profession presentism. Applying the morality of today, the norms of today, onto 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 1,000 years ago. It is profoundly ignorant. It's historically illiterate. But there's also something else, my friends. It's immoral. It's wrong. He is the founder of our country, and he created the greatest nation and the greatest republic in the world. And we can't even honor him here in the United States? This is a very bad omen. And what it shows is two things. We don't know our history. We don't honor our history. We don't honor our founding fathers. But there's something else that I find very dangerous. Is we're now living in a time of the tyranny of the minority, whereby the minority is able to tyrannize people anywhere in this country. If 3 or 4 people complain, everybody's got to capitulate. If 3 or 4 people complain, people have to cave. And whether it's issues regarding LGBT, whether it's issues involving illegal immigration, whatever the issue is, you call and complain, 1, 2, or 3, you target some advertisers, and before you know it, speech is silenced. Or in this case, a plaque is taken down. I would love to finally see a real counterattack against political correctness. I would love to see finally somebody say, here and no more. I find the plaque of George Washington offensive. Too bad. Don't go to the church. Well, how can you have it? It's a symbol of racism and bigotry and slavery. Too bad. You don't like it? Leave. No one's forcing you to come to this church. No one's asking you to be a tourist and come here. If you hate him so much, leave. Get lost. But he's the founder of our country. He's one of the greatest men, not just in America, but in the world. Period. Full stop. And I want to say one last thing. And this relates to the friend that I just lost. It's easy to spit on people and stand there and pick apart some of their moral failings. But why don't you achieve what they achieved? These men were builders. George Washington built a country. He built a nation. He built a republic. He brought the British Empire to its knees. What have you built? You stand there with your virtue signaling and your moral superiority and, oh, I find this offensive and I find this offensive and he held slaves and how dare he hold slaves. Look at your own life. What have you done? He built the greatest republic in the history of the world. He defeated the biggest, strongest empire of his time and gave us the greatest document in political liberty the world has ever seen. That's all he did. What have you done? Literally, what have you done with your life? That's the thing about these snowflakes. They always try to act morally superior to everybody and stand there and pick somebody's life apart. But look at their own life. Are they builders? Are they people who've done great things with their life? No, nothing. In fact, it's the very opposite. They're nothing more than spoiled whiners. We're now becoming, I hate to say this, a society of children. Of spoiled, privileged children. Who all we do now is whine and whine and whine and complain and bitch and moan. Among giants. George Washington was a giant. His critics today are pygmies. The plaque should not only stay up, there should be even more plaques of George Washington. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. Scott in New Hampshire. Go ahead, Scott.
Hey, Jeff.
Hey, Scott.
Hey, I'm real sorry. I'm sorry for your friend's loss.
Thank you.
And
thank you, Scott.
You know what? He sounded like a great guy, and it's a legacy he left behind, just like George Washington left behind. These people don't realize what. When I was a young kid, I didn't really look at life like I do now at 48 years old, Jeff. But I'll tell you what, finding out George Washington, the guy was in the battlefield with bullets flying by him. Let these snowflakes go in the Marines or the United States Marines and see how they get treated. Everybody's equal. There's black, Hispanic, all races are in the United States Marines. When you sign up for the Marines, you're in there. They own you. You listen to them. You don't kneel. You don't bow down. You do exactly what they say. And you know why? Because they're trying to save your life. And all these people are weak. And guess who's taking care of them? Us. People like you, Jeff, that are strong. And they need to realize we need to do something, like you said, a counterattack against these people.
Oh, I agree with you. Scott, thank you for that call. Really, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And thank you for your condolences. I really appreciate it as well. Look, we need a really blistering, devastating counterattack against political correctness. And look, I could go on about George Washington, but he was the only one who could have won the war against the British. And when you read the accounts, he was there with his men, freezing with his men, bullets whizzing by his head. You know, he wasn't some armchair general all the way in the back. He was there on the front lines for 7 long years. And when many of his troops demoralized because they lost a lot of battles, because the British were so much bigger and wealthier and stronger, they brought in many German mercenaries. He was the one that kept motivating them, kept them moving, kept their hope alive. And how he masterminded this for 7 years is one of the greatest wars for independence in human history. And you're completely right. These snowflakes couldn't spend 24 hours in a battlefield. And I'm talking modern day. I mean, I love the boys. Don't get me wrong, the troops, the boys and the girls. But I'm not talking about, water bottles and rations and bulletproof vests. Of course you should have it. Please don't get me wrong. But I'm talking incredibly primitive, savage conditions. And this guy, for 7 long years, he was like Churchill. Never give up. Never give up. Never give up. To me, it's what they're doing to this man is an absolute travesty. Donna, I've got less than a minute. I'm sorry. Go.
That's okay, honey. I'll close this hour. I'm so deeply sorry for your loss, and Brittany's and Jared's. Really, my warmest condolence to all of you. I wish I could give you a hug. If on this church thing, if everyone is welcome, are atheists and Nazis and jihadis. My philosophy is if no standards are allowed, so nobody out there is offended, they're not a church anymore. So I said this to you before. This is my sentence I say to a lot of people. If everything's okay for everyone, then nothing means anything to anyone. They are losing their moral ground as a church.
Bingo. Absolutely bingo. Okay, I got a lot more. Don't touch that dial.
The voice of Boston is you. 680 WRKO Boston, 93.7 WEEI HD2 Lawrence, Boston. It's 2 o'clock.